Testing. 1, 2, 3.
And we are live, episode number 2 with Abhi and Joe. Abhi, do you want to say a word?
Yep. This episode we'll be talking about brown guys and white girls. So, just a disclaimer. First up, brown. That word we use to sort of describe Indian men and South Asian men broadly, and girls, white girls, white representing some Australians, Americans, just white people everywhere. Again, it's not meant as disrespect. It's just so that the conversation can flow better. Any other disclaimers, Joe?
Second disclaimer, look, we do swear a lot, and we're going to talk some shit, and we're going to, we're going to be making some funny racial connotations, and, I guess we're two brown guys, so we can kind of get away with it. There we go. There's the first one right there. But if you can't handle it, probably not the episode for you. So no complaint letters, please, because we will not listen to it. Okay. But, hey... I think a good place to start, Abhi, is just let's just open up about our experience as brown guys in a different country,
deep
dating, right? And let's dive in the deep end, man. So a bit of context to the listeners. I was born in India. I spent 6 years of my life in India. So, from when I popped out to when I was 6 years old. We moved as a family. We immigrated as a family to New Zealand.
Yep.
And then I grew up mostly in Auckland. And then I moved from Auckland to Australia, to Sydney, where I live now, just before university. And I finished uni and kind of stayed here since. Mm-hmm. So I've had a pretty interesting journey in terms of just different countries, different cultures. I've never experienced dating in India. So I think, and so my experiences has been as an Indian guy in another country. So I think that's given me a completely different perspective. If I go back to my earliest experience when I was in primary school, that's when I figured out something's different. Like, I'm different, you know what I mean? And obviously then didn't care about girls, didn't care about, I just wanted to, play video games and watch cartoons.
Yeah.
But when I got to high school and, the girls that I'd never really paid attention to suddenly started to grow up a little bit, and I started to grow up a little bit, I started paying attention to, these girls a lot more. And I realized off the bat, like, I felt different. Like, I felt like especially when I grew up in Auckland, like I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So I was like the token brown kid in damn near every school that I was at before high school. And then it was a bit different because I went to a predominantly all boys high school. We did have a bit of a mix of ethnicities. Yep. So that's a different story. But again, the neighborhood that I lived in, I would always see, white girls. I would see a lot of white girls. And one of the challenges for me from, that sort of 13 to 15, 16 period was just trying to work out, like, are they attracted to me? Like, am I their cup of tea? It's navigating the whole sort of cultural differences because I grew up with a very strict Indian background, Indian parents. I wasn't allowed to party. I didn't have my first drink till I was like 17. Started fucking,
which is normal, by the way.
Yeah, look. I didn't think it was normal though, because I had mates that were partying at like 15 and 16.
Jeez,
right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I grew up in the sort of neighborhood where I could hear like the rich kids in the neighborhood throwing these like crazy parties. These mofos were like 16 years old. You know what I mean? And so I guess from a pretty early age on, I was just trying to work out these questions. Are they into me? Like, am I their cup of tea? Like, what is my experience going to be like in terms of dating in a different country? All these questions would pop up. There's a lot of like insecurities around that as well, right? It's like, am I attractive? Am I considered attractive? And we'll dive into sort of the all of those things later. But
the story of it. I think you told me something about the other day. It was like the story, the first white girl you dated. That's a really good one, probably.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And so the first girl I ever dated was a white girl. I mean, it was very brief. I personally don't think it really counted as a relationship. I mean, it was like 60 days, if that.
Yeah.
But, that was an interesting experience too. And honestly, I wasn't attracted to her by any means. It was just that her friends were like, hey, you should date her. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, some sort of social validation. And I get to say that I have a girlfriend.
Yeah.
But, I think a better one to share is when I got to university, my radar for white girl attraction was so broken there was a girl that really liked me,
Yeah.
gave me damn near every fucking sign under the sun, and I was completely oblivious
Yeah.
until her friend spelt it out, and she was like, "Hey, you know that so and so really likes you."
What caused that? What do you think caused this?
To just
Not notice the whole thing.
dude, I think a lot of it was just my own biases and experiences. It was just me being in my own head, right? I think I just had a lot of insecurities growing up in a predominantly white environment as an Indian man, and was an Indian boy, and never really thinking that I was attractive in that sense, you know. And a lot of it was just me kind of getting in my own head, right? Obviously, being a kid, I didn't know about self care and working out and taking care of myself and appearance and how to dress myself and
Yeah.
like charisma and any of that shit. Like it was so for me, it was just like I guess those like early years were brutal, man. Like it was just like, really stumbling around making fucking every mistake under the sun, as I think a lot of guys did in that age. But I feel like, being a brown guy, I feel like that, man, those mistakes just felt compounded. And yeah, it was just an interesting experience. But yeah, I mean, what about you, dude? Like, I guess, you know, you have a bit of a different journey.
Yeah.
What's that been like for you growing up, and what's your sort of exposure and experience been like with white girls?
Cool. Yeah, I was obviously, because you grew up in New Zealand, right? I was born in India and I came to Australia when I was 7, so I grew up here as well. I've been here most of my life. So I think when I was young, I'd say probably like 12 or 10 or 11, somewhere around that. My first time. This is like primary school. There were these 2 girls that I just had a little bit of a crush on. Obviously, they're white girls, and then I don't know. It wasn't like it was a non-sexual thing. It was just a kid having a little crush, and that was probably the first time, like I started to feel something. And then over time, as I got older, I think in high school didn't really have many interactions with like non-brown chicks. Like a lot of my friends were like Indians, or like we'd hang out with other brown girls and so on. It wasn't until university where I noticed that, I don't know, like every time I'd go out, let's say to a bar or a club, try to approach a white girl, and they would have like this polite interaction with me, but it wouldn't go anywhere. And I'm trying to think how much of that was because I didn't know how to actually, like date or attract and, seduce, whatever, like pick up, whatever the term is, right? How much of that is like my fault for not being able to, as a guy, engage with the girl, and how much of that is because I am brown and she's probably not into like brown guys. So that is like always been a question in my mind. I think we'll probably discuss more of this later in the episode, but I think like that was sort of like that's where that experience of like interacting with white girls came for me. Over the course of sort of like last couple of years, I started to do improv comedy, and doing improv and doing like going out and meeting people. I've actually interacted with lots and lots of white girls, but in the context of like doing comedy with them, hanging out with them, but not necessarily in terms of dating. And so my experience in this is a little bit limited, but I can tell from the times that I've approached and even some of the times that I've had friends with them, there seems to be a little bit of this barrier, a little bit of this preference. And that's something we'll be talking more about today. So another thing really quick thing that we want to talk about is I think you mentioned some other like a couple of days ago that something that gets under your skin is like you don't look Indian. And for me, I've had I do look Indian, but like I think for me it's like you don't sound Indian. So I can talk about that, but like, just real quickly, what's it been like when people say, how do you feel when people say you don't look Indian, and do you take it as an insult, and how do you process it?
Yeah, dude, it's a bit of a crazy one, and like I mean, a bit of a, I guess I'll share a personal story here,
Yeah.
but I mean, I had yeah, I was on one of the dating apps. I'm pretty infrequent on it, but when I do, I guess it was during the holiday period, and I thought, fuck it, why not? Let's get on and swipe a little bit.
Yeah.
And I matched with this girl who was from San Diego, who's now in Sydney. And she's kind of got a bit of a mixed Spanish descent, like Puerto Rican American mix. And it was interesting because we bonded over the fact that she's Puerto Rican, she wants to learn bachata. I dance bachata, and I was like, hey, I can teach you. And so somewhere in there, the topic of race came up, and I was like, oh, obviously you're Puerto Rican. I'm guessing the other half of you is American. She's like, yeah. She's like, how about you? Because she speaks Spanish, so as a joke, I was like, no soy Indio, which means, no, I'm Indian.
Yeah.
And and she kind of said, haha, you look Spanish. And then I don't think she caught it the first time when I said it in Spanish or typed it in Spanish. So then I said, no, yeah, I'm 100% Indian. And nothing. Like, just straight ghosted.
Ooh.
I mean, I didn't respond back after that. Like, when I said I'm 100% Indian, and then I just waited to see if she'd respond, nothing. And it was an interesting experience where, like, I think to your point around that barrier,
Yeah.
I felt that too. Like, when I was in uni, like, don't get me wrong, I've dated white girl, I've been with / fucked white girls, I've slept with white women, probably gonna bleep that out, but like, I've had that experience, but there's definitely barriers in some situations, where I felt that too, but I guess to go back to the question that you'd asked,
Yeah.
To go back to that question that you'd asked, around you don't look Indian. Yeah, like, that's something that definitely gets under my skin a little bit. Like, I get that sometimes when I get into Ubers, the top, like, classic Uber conversation. Oh, where are you from? Yeah, I'm from so-and-so. Where are you from? From India. Oh, you don't look Indian. The fuck is an Indian supposed to look like, bro? Like, and like, I brush it off, but it's one of those things that I'm curious about. It's like, what does that question really mean? Is there some sort of stereotype? And I think we're going to touch on that topic a bit later, of stereotypes. But, I think there's this image of, like, in the Western world almost, of, like, what Indian looks like. And, like, I get that, like, I don't fit that by any means.
Yeah.
But it's a bit of a funny one, dude.
Mm-hmm. I think that sounds like tough. Like, I think one of the things, like, and no one wants to hear, I think, not just brown guys, but I think in general, people don't want to hear you don't look or sound of the cultural descent that you're from. Like, if you're, I don't know, Italian, you don't look like Italian. Or if you're like, like Russian, you don't look Russian. Like, if you say, you're Indian, you don't look Indian.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, on one hand, I can see that, okay, maybe I have certain features, or you have certain features that, don't align entirely with that. But on one hand, I think it's also the fact that this person has a stereotype in their mind of what an Indian should be. And that, I think, can sometimes hinder them and hinder the interaction overall. I think for me, the main thing that's happened is you don't sound Indian. Because obviously I work in sales, as do you. You'd know that when you're hitting the phones, you're calling people up, or even when you like first start talking to them, the accent that I have, it's not Apu from The Simpsons. So therefore they're like, oh, you speak really good English for an Indian. I'm like, what? Oh, that's like you would not say that to any person. And like, it's happened once or twice. That hasn't happened a lot. And obviously you just, brush it off. But I think it's just something to think about. Is like, as time goes on, as, people from India, born in Australia, Indian descent, but born in Australia, or people of like, people are born in a different country, they grew up in that country, even though they might have a certain cultural heritage, they're fundamentally a part of that country. Like, like, I am Australian Indian, but let's be honest, I'm like more Australian than I'm Indian. That's why the fucking tagline for this podcast is two coconuts sharing their experience. Because literally, sometimes we feel like you're brown on the outside, white on the inside. And that's I think that's something to think about. So I think to sort of dig deeper, like, what causes this? Like, what is the mindset behind this, and how I sort of felt and how people in general feel. Like, I've often felt like, as a brown guy, you have to be slightly above average, just to keep up with the average white guy. Like, for example, right, if I were to go up, like, as I was talking about, in the past, I'd walk up to chicks in the bar. And so, like, let's say I'm approaching this white girl. If, like, me and, like, this another white guy, both of us are average, walk up to this girl, 9 out of 10 times she's going to pick the white guy, which is perfectly understandable. So, me as a brown guy, I have to be, like, like a little bit like I have to be like an amazing or above average brown guy. I have to have the looks, the lean six pack, or like the good physique. I have to be very well spoken. I have to be more funny, more of everything. I can't be average because for me to compete with, let's say, the average white guy, that's what it feels like in my head. It's like I have to be above average. I don't know. Have you felt something like that yourself, Joe?
Yeah, I'd be like that. I think the last point that you made around, I guess, having to compete or be a little bit better. And I've had I've had my own perspective on that. I guess growing up, man, like, and this is just insecurities that I had, right? I felt like I just couldn't compete, i- you know, with the white guys. Like I was just like, wow, like, this is during high school and maybe even early uni. I just felt like I had no shot compared to my, Aussie friends or like the Aussie guys because, I just felt that deep insecurity where I was just like, I just didn't have a shot. But what's crazy is like, when I started to put my life together, started to make money, started to make really good money, improved my lifestyle, improved my physical appearance, got in the gym, got into really good shape, got hobbies, got some depth, learned how to dance, like became interesting and just a cool person in my own right. Not to toot my own horn, but I found like when I sort of went through that journey, the insecurities faded because then I found my own unique value. So now I'm confident. Like when I sort of walk into a bar or walk into a room and there's different ethnicities, there's brown, there's white, there's Asian, whatever. I don't sort of look at it and worry about the race card. I don't worry about approaching, an Aussie woman, or I don't worry, it's like I now find that like a lot of like I have interesting encounters with women of, with white women, with, women of different ethnicities. But it goes back to that point, dude, which is getting out of my own head, and like doing the work, putting my life together. As good old Jordan Peterson would say, start with cleaning my room. But like when I sort of tidied up my own little patch of the world, I found that it flowed into the dating experience where I was less self-conscious about it. And it's sometimes still like a work in progress though. I still have like, if I walk into like a room full of just white people, and I'm the only, I guess, ethnic person there. Sometimes that insecurity can sort of, pop its head up. Yeah.
Interesting. I think, I guess I agree. I mean, obviously, what you refer to is like becoming the better version of yourself. That's personal development at its finest, right? It's you transforming yourself to a better version of who you are, and as a result, you no longer feel some of that. I think maybe along that personal development journey, at least in the physical realm, I think I'm a little bit behind you because I'm still early in my journey. I'm still trying to become physically the best version I can be. For those listeners who don't obviously know me like in person, I'm a bit of a fat fuck, but I'm getting there. I've been doing boxing this year, been doing like running, like I'm getting there. Like I've lost like 5-6 kilos already. So I think, but I think in terms of mentally, I've actually done I think quite a lot of work as well to try and overcome that limiting mindset. Like it is fundamentally a limiting mindset, right? You feel like you're not equal to a person of a different race. I think if we sort of deconstruct this a little bit deeply, there's I think a couple of factors. One factor is the colonial past. Like this is not a podcast where we like sit here and like we're not victims or anything, but just a little bit of acknowledgement. Like yes, some things have happened in the past where like certain countries, UK, Britain, Great Britain, expanding their fucking empire and oppressing other countries and invading other countries. That has left a little bit of that residue. Where even today, I find that when you go to India, there's almost this like not a fetish, but like there's almost like this like awe of like someone who's like fairer skinned and someone who's like from overseas and someone who's like like white. And even in Asia, I'm sure many of our friends, like from China and Japan and like all Southeast Asia, like I'm sure they can also acknowledge that some of the women and even some of the guys, they have this slight not inferiority, but I guess just a sense of like perception that like white guys are incredible and like we're not at the same level as them. And I think for me personally, like I very rarely feel that just because I myself have also worked on that internally, but physically I still think there's still room for improvement, and there's still like a little while before I can completely overcome that. I think another point that I wanted to bring up was like this concept of nature versus nurture. I think when you're growing up as well, um, actually let's go with nature first. So fundamentally, and I could be wrong about this obviously, but I believe that humans, feathers are the same feathers are the same whatever fucking thing is flock together.
Yeah.
Feathers are the same something.
Birds are the same feather.
Birds are the same feather flock together. That's it. Thank God you're here. So what I think that means essentially is that when you are Indian and you walk into a room and you see another Indian guy or an Indian girl, you feel an instant connection because you have the same ethnicity. I'm sure white people feel the same way when they like walk into a room. Like I'm sure a white girl walks into a room and she's like a white guy, she feels that instant connection. I'm sure an Italian guy walks into a room and she's the Italian girl, he sees that instant connection. Like whatever, like any country, like China, Japan, like when you walk into a room and you see someone of your same tribe, you feel an instant clip. And it's a little subconscious thing. Like I felt it, and maybe because you have that sort of cultural advantage where you can speak to them, where you know some of their personal life is similar to your personal life. Maybe they grew up with Asian parents. I have Asian parents. Like you sort of feel there's some connection there. You know what I mean? So I think that sort of nature is instinctive, and I think like people. I don't blame them. Like if white girls like white guys or like black girls like black guys, it's perfectly understandable. The other thing was like nature, like nurture. Like as I was growing up, I think I don't know who it was. I'm not sure if it's my dad or if it's my cousins or some of my brothers. Like someone somewhere said something like white girls would never go for brown guys. And that statement, I think it imprinted into my mind, and that has actually caused affected that mindset and caused that limiting mindset where when I'm walking into an interaction, I've already felt like I'm not good enough, or I'm like this is not going to work out. And that I think goes down to how you're raised and how the people around you can influence you and turn you into who you are. So I think nature and nurture, they play a big role. And that's probably why I'm not blaming the colonial past, I'm not blaming nature or nurture. I'm just saying that these are some of the factors that go into making that limiting mindset. And at the end of the day, like as you said, right, you have to overcome this. And the way you overcome this is personal development, which we'll talk about down the track. Do you want to like say anything, add something to that?
No, dude, I think you summed it up pretty well there. It's what I really took away from all of that is like, and I do a lot of this as well. It's just getting in our own head, like and I think to the people listening, it's especially I guess the brown guys listening,
Yeah.
it's like sometimes we just fucking get in our own head. We're like, oh, she doesn't like me. I'm not into she's not going to be into me, blah blah blah. But it's like, look, like attraction's attraction, and like I'm reading a couple of really interesting books right now, Why Women Have Sex. I referenced that book before. I'm
Yeah.
reading Rollo Tomassi's Rational Male.
Yep.
And the fundamentals of attraction are still the fundamentals of attraction, right? Is like as basic as it is. It's like how masculine does that man look? His hip to waist ratio, does he look like he has good genetics? Like, his social proof, his social validation. I think one of the quotes from the Rational Male is basically, women want to be with men that other men want to be like, and other women want to be with, right? And it's like it doesn't really matter of race or creed. Realize now is that if you're that kind of guy, you kind of rank pretty high in the dating marketplace, right? And everyone will want to more or less be with you, bar a few that probably might have a fetish thing and or they're just like, hey, like I just really don't like brown dudes,
Yeah.
But like for the most part, like if you're ticking, I guess, the markers, the genetic markers, the social markers, the financial markers that make you attractive in a classic sense, you will appeal to women of all races because you fit the bill. Like they want to be with you. And I think the other point as well, I think we sort of briefly discussed, I'm going to sort of hand over to you in a second to sort of touch on it, is that whole sort of 80-20 rule and how, in any situation, right, like we're in sales, so 80% of the money is made by 20% of the people, right? Like, 80% of the commissions, 20% of the sales performers. And I think it's pretty similar in the dating world as well. I think a lot of the stats getting thrown around right now where it's like, if you look at who's winning on dating sites and dating apps, it's 20% of the top men that are getting 80% of the action. And so I think that's going to be an interesting place to sort of talk about as well from an ethnic perspective. But what's your take on that?
I couldn't agree more. I think the 80-20 rule is definitely it's obviously a broad principle. It's not a set formula for the universe, but it comes from the Pareto principle. You guys can check it out on just Google it, obviously. Um, I think I think the dating stats are something along those lines where it's like top 20 or 25% of guys get like more than like 70 to 80% of swipes, and so that makes sense. Like, and this goes back to your point around like being the better version of yourself. When you're the best version of yourself, when you're like right up there, you literally won't feel that because, as you said, you don't feel it as much as me. And that I think another way to apply that rule as well is like in sales and in just the whole marketplace. Like when it comes to dating, and then we can sort of dig deep into this specific topic. White girls that want to date brown guys, like these women do exist. And so, from a sales standpoint, you obviously know this very well. You will never close 100% of the market. That is impossible. No company in the world will ever close like 100% of the product. Will never dominate anything. Even Google is like 90 something percent in search engine. There is still other search engines. So that just goes to show there's no such thing as 100% market penetration. No pun intended. So just the same thing in this specific context, right? I think, and this is just my hypothesis slash unvalidated theory, but I think it sort of makes sense. Like in the market right now, there's probably like 10, 15, maybe 20% of white girls that want to date brown guys or Asian guys, right? And then you've got maybe like 70 to 80% of the market that's like probably just looking for their own sort of their own sort of white guys, their own people from the same background. And I think maybe like another 15, 20% will definitely not date white guys. I mean brown guys. So they definitely will not date you no matter what. So like if you sort of that's how I sort of think about it. Like some percentage of the market will want to go out with me, and some percent will never want to go out with me. But most of them are just going to stick to their own sort of cultural background because, as I mentioned earlier, it's that nature and nurture, right? You grow up feeling that connection to people of the same background as you. So I think as a guy, I think the goal should never be let me go after people that are not interested in me, let me get rejected, and then let me feel bad about myself. That's not the right process. The process should be, I think, reaching out to people, as many people as you can. Maybe, like if it works out, that's great. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter. Just understand that this person is not for me and I am not for this person. But there is someone out there who wants you. And do you want to talk a little bit more about like, because I'm sure you've got some lots of spicy experiences, some like women that just want brown guys. They've got the fetish.
Dude, it's crazy. Like I don't think I've encountered anyone. Actually, no, I take that back. Yeah. So, again, not going to name names, but it was someone that I encountered through one of my hobbies.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it nice and broad.
Yeah.
But she was a little bit older. She was, getting kind of close to 40, really good shape. I was 25 at the time,
Nice.
so I mean, she was really laying the cougar on. I was 26 at the time, but she was like really into the fact that I was brown, and I think multiple times, like, during some of our encounters, like she would, use words like, addicted, like love your like skin, love your look. And it's, the women definitely exist, like white women that really fucking love, non-white guys. Like, I've had a lot of female friends that, white women that say that they're not actually into white guys, that they say they find white guys really boring, which is kind of funny, and I found that quite comical. But I think there's a market that definitely exists for the product that we're offering, But the thing that I'll sort of say is like mutual attraction is sexy. And I was having this conversation with one of my girlfriends, literally like yesterday, where she was talking about, she's Asian. She was talking about a white guy that was just like wouldn't take no for an answer. Oof. It was like the fourth time that he was asking her out, and he was just like determined to keep asking her out.
Yeah.
And the thing that I guess I sort of had a laugh about in that situation, obviously, anything that gets like borderline fucking stalkery is not funny. But I thought in that situation it was kind of comical that she had to keep telling this guy no in like 16 different ways, and I don't think the message still has gotten through. Worst part is like he lives quite close to her, so I mean she really shot herself in the foot with that one.
Yeah.
But like on the topic of the subset that will really like you will know when there's mutual attraction. Like if you're a guy that's like, look, if you're past 25 years old and you can't pick up when a girl's into you, you have a different problem, right? Like then it's like, okay, like go get some social skills, bro, because like you will know when a girl's into you, right? It's those little things. She'll want to be close to you. She'll like it when you touch her. She'll make intense eye contact. Her eyes will flicker down to your lips when you're talking. That's a dead giveaway. Like those are all like, she's going to be rubbing her hand in her hair and like, she give you the certain look, like you'll know. So I guess like the whole sort of mutual attraction thing is really sexy, and it's important that if she's not having a bar of it, don't try to give her a bar of it, right? Pun intended, right? Like because you'll know if she's into you, and if she is into you, then great, right? But those women definitely exist, and there's definitely like I think Australia becoming more and more multicultural.
Yeah.
There was a stat, Abhi, that you and I were talking about, which is the Australian to Australian, so basically white to white marriage ratio was the percentage was 72.9% in 2006. That has fallen to only 54% in 2018. So in the space of like 12 years, my math is right. Yeah, 12 years. Yeah. That percentage it's almost 20% drop.
Yeah.
Right. And I think in another 12 years, we're going to see that probably drop another 20%, where white to white, Aussie to Aussie marriages is going to drop because Australia is becoming so much more multicultural. Like 1 in 3 marriages in Australia is multicultural. So I think like there's a lot that speaks volumes in terms of how multicultural we're becoming, how Aussie women are probably getting a lot more open to dating foreign men, not just Indian men, but Asian men, like African men, like that is expanding and changing. And I think as the generations progress, we're just going to keep becoming more and more multicultural.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
I think that's a fantastic point you made. I couldn't agree more. I think in terms of the first point around like the kind of women, there are obviously the white women that want to go with brown guys. I think the description, like I think generic sort of description that my observation has been like these kind of white women that want to go out with like a brown guy, they generally seem to have traveled to India, or they have had some like interest in like yoga or like meditation, or like they just find the culture fascinating, like the colors, the Bollywood movies, the food. And so I think I don't know, if I have to be really like I don't know what's the call it, stereotypical. I would say they're probably like liberal, like a little bit lefty women, white chicks. They're like really open minded, and I think that's sort of that's been my sort of observation, personal observation. Obviously, no offense implied there, but that's just been the stereotypical white girl that's been into brown guys. And I think that also, I think the point that you made around Australian trends and marriages and dating, I couldn't agree more. I think it's interesting to take a different example just to add. So in America, for example, right, and this is back 1920s, early 19th century, early 20th century, the marriages between white and black people like were just frowned upon by society. And so I remember reading like a long time ago. So I don't know the exact source for this, but it was like the surveys indicated that like 80 or 90% of the people thought that it was like unacceptable for interracial marriage between black and white. And then you fast forward that to almost 100 years, like early 2010s. It's like 100 years later, like it's like almost flipped. Like it's almost like 60 to 70% of like people think it's completely okay. There's like 30 to 40% that think it's not okay, or at least they're not in that preference for interracial. That just goes to show that society over time, changes in terms of like marriage preferences. And America is like a fine sort of example or case study on this. Australia, I think, is almost along the same lines, where people are more and more open to sort of people of different backgrounds. And I think the first and second generation of Australian Indians that are born here, that grow up here, that literally feel like they're coconuts, are brown on the outside, white on the inside. Like they are able to go out there and like compete and find and attract and find someone that they're happy with in a relationship. And so I think now's a good time to sort of like zoom out a little bit and to sort of look at what is causing this sort of this brown white. What is like? What are the trends? What are the causes on a societal level that are causing this? So I think, do you want to talk about it real quickly first?
Yeah, I think that's a good pivot as well, because it's Abhi, you and I were having a bit of a giggle about I guess the reputation that some brown men give all brown men. You know what I mean? And I think there's going to be a subset of subset of listeners to this, and especially some of the brown girls maybe that are listening to this, some of the Indian girls that are listening to this, and we'll probably have a bit of a laugh. But you would have probably had a few creepy brown dudes slide into your DMs, and maybe even some of the white chicks that are listening to this, right? Is you would have probably had some creepy brown dudes like sliding into your DMs, with some really inappropriate shit. And honestly, on behalf of my people and my gender, and just the general brown population, the general brown guy population, I'm sorry about that. Like that's not the entire group. I've sent a couple of dick pics in my lifetime, but they've all been consensual. They've been requested dick pics. You know what I mean? But we joke about it, but I think the media and the media and I guess the content out there does have a bit of a portrayal of portrays brown guys a certain way. And it's a little comical in some situations. It's sometimes just downright fucking disrespectful in other situations. But I think growing up on like The Simpsons, for example, right? Apu. I mean, Apu did us no fucking favors, bro. And that combined with the fact that like 90% of like 7-Eleven and Quickie Mart owners, just happen to be brown guys. Like owner operators are brown guys. It's like, fuck, man, like you're really like perpetuating that stereotype, which is pretty funny, but at the same time it's just it's kind of bang on and doesn't help, right? I think the other one, Abhi, that we talked about was the Big Bang Theory.
Oh yeah.
Right. And Raj Koothrappali, like not being able to talk to women until he fucking drinks, and then when he does, he just says really dumb shit. So I guess it's kind of funny where it's like, there's this whole media perception as well of what, Indian men or brown men are like. And I think we're seeing a bit of a change now as well, right? I mean, we've got, actors like Kumail Nahil and, and there's a bunch of other Indian actors. Aziz Ansari, he's had his own little troubles, but, that are sort of changing the perception of Indian men in media. Almost starting to get to the point where it's getting cool now. It's getting, it's getting sexy now. Like, if you think about in Crazy Rich Asians, the lead male actor in that, I mean, I think he's like single-handedly like paving the way for like attractive Asian leads in Hollywood. Like I have female friends that love that dude. Like white girls that are just like, they have crazy yellow fever for that dude. They're just like, he is the most attractive thing ever. And I think we're sort of starting to see the same thing now in like with Hollywood and media, with Indian men starting to not just be these sort of typecast racial stereotypes, but like they're starting to kind of break out of that. They're becoming seen a bit more mainstream. They're sort of fitting into that sexy role. And I think it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. But man, like what's your take on that situation?
I think I couldn't agree more in terms of like the poor representation of Indians in media. First part, because I feel like like Hollywood perception of Indians isn't helping us. Like now that you mentioned like Crazy Rich Asians, that's a very good not stereotype. That's a very good what do you call it, role model, or very good, just a guy that represents cool Asian guys. Like there are a lot of cool Asian guys, right? And so like this guy is starting to like come out into space, and people are starting to look at this icon, this person, and think that's a pretty, like I would love to date that kind of guy. And so much the same way, I mean, on one hand, obviously he's like, let's be honest, he's like in the top like 1% of all guys. He's good looking, tall, got a job, got everything. Not every Asian guy is going to be like that. Obviously, you have to aspire to be the best version of you, and there's a bunch of things to do. But I think generally that sort of media perception is going to help versus like hinder, the dating sort of space. And so going back to like Indians, right? There's a bunch of people. Like I couldn't agree more. Dave Patel is one. I love his movie, like Slumdog Millionaire, but also his latest movies like Lion and stuff. Like he's just a killer actor. Cal Penn from like Harold and Kumar, that's amazing. Obviously we have like Hassan Minaj, who's like got this fantastic stuff in America. There's like Russell Peters, and there's like all these like Bollywood actors like SRK, like there's Shah Rukh Khan, right? He's got a global sort of reputation. So like there are lots and lots of characters in both Hollywood and Bollywood that are sort of making the Indian name and like making the Indian stereotype better, which I think will have a follow-on effect in like dating and marriage. And I think people in the future will be more kinder and just more respectful towards South Asian men. I think going back to that point around creepy Indian guys, like that's a sec like that is number one and a big issue. Like a lot of people online, like people that are sort of from India that don't know how to properly use Facebook, or even people that are on LinkedIn, and there's a story there which maybe you might be open to sharing, that are like just very very socially unaware and unsure about how to approach women. They think it's okay to slide into someone's DMs and say something completely inappropriate in the weird off chance that this woman would like be okay with this. And not only is that unrequested and unsolicited, it's like it's disrespectful, and it's just not helping us as Indian guys, because what this white girl or what this woman in general is going to walk away is that like this is how brown guys are. She's going to have a negative perception of brown guys because of this one incident. So I hope some of the white girls that are just women that are listening to this. I hope you realize that as Joe said, first of all, we're sorry on behalf of him, those kind of fucking creepy cunts. But more importantly, it's like there are lots of amazing brown guys. It's just that these guys were like terrible. They have had this social platform, this social way of connecting with you on like social media, and they're just bringing out the worst of like the people that are out there. I think that's probably that's something that I really want to like emphasize. Like, not every fucking Indian guy is creepy. And so I think the classic meme, like it's like send me Bobs and Bajin, like that's like a classic in the meme space. So I think, do you want to really quickly,
Dude, I just had to hop in with something there. Like, one of the memes I saw was like, if you don't compliment your girlfriend, some creepy Indian guy will in her DMs.
Oh, it's fucking crazy. I reckon honestly, like if this is gonna sound harsh, but like if let's say Facebook was not allowed in India, or at least not allowed for Indian men, I swear to God, like the perception of like brown guys globally would just go up, skyrocket. Like I've seen so many memes of like brown guys reaching out on social media. It's so cringy, so bad, but it is what it is. Do you want to really quickly share that LinkedIn story as well, just real quick, because I think that's an interesting one where I think something happened.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it was just really cringy. Classic cringe fest. Really, like one of my really good friends, former colleagues, was on LinkedIn, and I mean, she was just getting harassed by this dude who was just messaging her nonstop, and he was Indian. He was clearly he looked like he was a little bit fobby as well, and just really inappropriate shit, man. And I guess it's stuff like that that just really doesn't help, the perception of Indian men. And so, Abhi, you and I, we got to keep fighting the good fight, bro. We got to, we got to pave the way for the next generation of, and uphold the honor of the brown reputation. I'm just talking shit at this point. But you know what? Like, I think while we're in a bit of a shit talking mood, and we'll maybe finish off with something serious in a bit, but it's this whole idea of like street cred. And I think as brown guys, when we're walking down the street, and maybe we picked up a white girl, or we're dating a white girl, and it's a serious thing. It's not just like a one night stand. You met her at a club or whatever, and it's this like street cred moment. Like when I walk past like another brown brother, and he's got like he's got a fine white girl, I kind of look at him, and I just give him a little nod. It's just a universal nod. Like, yeah. Dude, fucking good on you, man. Yeah. Like, lay it down. Like, lay it down for the rest of the brothers. Like, like, make us fucking proud. Like, and it's just really funny. Like, and I feel like a lot of people listening to this, like, you've probably done that shit too. Like, you walk past a guy. I had this one experience where it was with someone that I was kind of casually seeing at the time, and it was a really nice night. I planned a bit of a date, went to an Italian restaurant, booked a nice hotel room, and we stopped off into like a fuck, I'm gonna hate this part. Stopped into a 7-Eleven, and of course it was an Indian guy behind the counter, and he sort of looked at me, he looked at her. And when she looked away, he just kind of looked at me and gave me this little grin, and this nod, and he was like, "Do it, brother. I'm proud of you." And it was just really funny, like, it's just it's street cred's a thing, man. But I think it's we're having a bit of a laugh and it's lighthearted, but we all fucking do it.
Yeah. I couldn't. I think I felt that too as well. Like it just seems to be like respect, like street cred when. Like you're a brown guy, and let's say you're dating a white girl, and you like walk in any place, any location, and there's another another brown guy. He'll literally look at you, and you'll feel this instant connection. He'll be like, "Yeah, good job, man, good job, well done, well done. I'm proud of you."
Why are we doing an Indian accent?
I don't know. Actually,
I know.
We have perpetuating the negative stereotypes, but fuck, it's hilarious. And I think I can see that. Why? Like, I can see the logic behind that is that. As obviously, if white women are like amazing and you were like got like incredible blonde or brunette, just angels. Like if you wanted to, if you managed to bag one, like not bag one, if you managed to like fucking like, I'm just like, this is a Me Too movie right here. No,
you've almost had a Me Too movement right there.
If you essentially managed to date a white girl,
managed to put her into my eco-friendly bag.
Eco-friendly.
You got to think about the planet, dude.
Yeah, man, totally. Couldn't agree more. But essentially, if you're dating like a white girl, like and you do go out, like I think even your parents to some extent will be like, "Well done, Benja, well done. You're making the colonists pay. You're getting this is like payback for taking over India. Suck it, Great Britain." It's like like I reckon there's like a ghost of my grandfather. He'd be like just high fiving me in the back, just like yes, this is what I fought for.
Dude, I think the ghosts of your grandparents are probably very disappointed at you at this moment. It's like, what is this? Why is my great grandson just talking so much shit?
I think let's move on to
something a little serious, and I think it's just this whole idea of like negative perceptions towards white girls, and like we've had a lot of conversations around this where as brown guys, and I've heard this from other brown guys, is that there's this negative perception. Like, I remember I once sat in the back of an Uber. It's always in the fucking back of an Uber. Like, Uber drivers, like, engage me in the most intense conversations. You know what I mean? Like, gonna go off on a bit of a tangent here, but I had an Uber driver that told me that his daughter died. Ooh. Right, and this was within the first 10 minutes. This was within the first, like, fucking 45 seconds of getting into Uber. Right, I asked him where he's from, and then he was like, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I lost a child, and, and I was like, dude, I'm really sorry to hear that, but I've just had a really good night. And like, let's talk about the weather. Let's talk about Sydney's weather. It's been a little funny lately, hasn't it? But no, like, he wanted to really get into the topic, you know what I mean? Yep. But, like, I had a similar thing. Yep. With this other guy, with this other Uber driver. I think he might have been Pakistani. And he got onto the topic of we got into the topic of whether or not he liked it here or where he preferred it back home. And he just sort of said, "Nah, man, like I don't like it here." And I guess it is the culture. It's the women. They're a little crazy. They party too much, or and I thought that was really interesting. Where I think there's a lot of, like, as brown guys, like, I used to have a lot of negative perceptions towards white women, and I'd say, they're not maybe as faithful, they're more likely to cheat, they're coming from, I guess, an Indian background where divorces are quite low. I guess when you get married, you're married. You ride it out, like, till death do you apart, or till one of you motherfuckers kill each other, right? But it's like, so I guess coming from that and then coming to Australia, to New Zealand, and then coming to Australia, I always had this weird negative perception. And what I sort of later realized, and I started to break those perceptions myself, was I was always of the mindset that it's okay to date white girls or casually have flings with white girls, but always settle down with a brown girl because she will be more faithful to you. And honestly, like, I felt like a jackass for having that mindset, because I think, yes, culture plays something into it, race plays something, because that race is tied to culture, but there's so much more. Like, it's the whole nature versus nurture thing we talked about. And I've met white women that are amazing, like loyal, faithful, have like great values, just good human beings, great girlfriends. And likewise, I've been with brown women that are just like absolute like horror shows, like, and so that really smashed my perception that, oh, I have to marry a brown woman because she's going to be faithful, more faithful to me. But I can, I guess white women don't have that same level of, they're not going to be faithful, or because I'm an ethnic man, our culture's different. She's going to be more likely to cheat. And honestly, like, that perception has changed a fair bit, because it is a individual to individual basis, right? It's like, what is that person really like? What are their values? What do they care about? Do they actually value long-term relationships? Can they ride it out through the ups and the downs? Do they have the right character? And that, it's just so hard to put a blanket statement on that and just be like, don't date white women because they're not faithful. It's like, where the fuck are you getting that from? So again, that's something that I had, and something that I've worked through, I'm continuing to sort of work through. But yeah, negative perceptions, man, around white women. I'm curious to sort of hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat as you, my friend. I think a lot of brown guys, I think they genuinely sort of, on one hand, like as we talked about earlier, there's this like white women are treasured and prized. You will have that street cred and respect. But on the other hand, it's interesting that those same people also have a negative perception. They'll literally just say, like, go have fun with a white girl, but go settle down with like an Indian girl. Like, go settle down with a cultural Desi, like go settle down with someone who's like similar to you. Like I think the logic behind that, and just to sort of be like a devil's advocate, is that the logic behind why they're thinking that is that they believe that just because someone is like of Indian origin, like they grew up in India, have these cultural values, and these cultural values is going to make them faithful and loyal and good, and they can get along with the family, and they can serve the mother-in-law, and like all that bullshit. Like, I genuinely have come to realize, like like you, like when I was younger, I thought that white girls are not loyal, are not faithful, they're promiscuous, they're just very like they're easy because they know that they're more sexually just open about things. And then I think what I've come to realize is that that is not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing in the way that women in the West, like white women in the West, they've like feminism has taken root in such that they feel empowered to be open and honest and be sexual. And whereas in India and certain parts of Asia, their feminism hasn't quite reached that point. Like even today, like I mean, one of my colleagues is from like Asia, and she's soon to be married, and she's just finished university. Like I think she's kind of not sure, but maybe she might be forced into that marriage. And so I feel like in Asia, there's still like so much like to happen in terms of feminism, in terms of female empowerment, that women don't have as much choice, both in marriage and dating. And so like it's just very different there. So it's not that women in India or people from India are not promiscuous or disloyal or not sexually open. It's just that the culture hasn't quite reached where the West is, and so therefore the women themselves are not behaving the same way the women in the West are. And let's just like compare like apples to apples, right? If I reckon, and this is my honest opinion, I've come to realize this, and this is how I overcame my negative mindset, is that I've come to realize that if you sort of have India and give them the Western sort of feminism, sort of empowerment, bring that culture right to where it is today, you will literally have probably the same divorce statistics, same amount of adultery, cheating, same amount of sexual openness, and just freedom to talk about sex and be, like sexually empowered. Like everything will be about the same. The only reason it isn't where it is, it's because India hasn't reached that stage. I think if I sort of take my personal experience, like my parents obviously got divorced. They would never have gotten divorced if they were in India. Like that, I'm 100% sure of that. I'm 100% sure that if they were still in India, if I never came to Australia, my parents would have lived that uncomfortable marriage. They would have just like pushed through and just found a way to make things work, and they would have had a miserable relationship, but they would have just done it all the way till death do us apart, all that nonsense, instead of like getting divorced, instead of like trying to find someone else and trying to have a better life. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing is that India is different, Australia is different, like Western countries are different. Broadly speaking, like women everywhere, like whether it's India or Australia, some percentage of them are like high quality, good, kind, loyal female women. Some percent are like low quality, like adulterous, deceitful, manipulative, like just horrible, horrible people. And most people are like somewhere in between. Like most people are just average or ordinary. They're trying to just live their life and try to be the best version of themselves. And that's sort of the three categories. And like maybe because it's sales meme, like everything seems to be like a market for me. Like like top 20% of the market, middle 60 to 70%, and at the bottom 20% of the market. Yeah. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, man. I think you just raised something pretty interesting there around divorce in
Mm.
India. Again, we're gonna just like tiny little tangent, but it is so taboo over there. And I remember when I was growing up, when my parents talked about anyone in the family getting divorced, it was with so much like there was just like so much taboo around it. It was like, oh my god, like, can you believe that person's divorced? It's as if like that's the end. You know what I mean? And it's yeah, like I think India's got a lot of catching up to do. I think that's a completely different conversation. That is a whole nother fucking cesspool that we can get into,
Yeah.
and let's not do that today. But it does have a lot of catching up.
Yeah.
But I think sort of a good pivot, off the back of that whole sort of, we talked about a lot of things, limiting beliefs. We talked about negative perceptions. We talked about experience, and I think the thing that really goes back to, in this whole kind of, as brown men dating in another country, dating white women, is it just goes back to that one of the points that I made at the start, which is personal development. Like, I think that's going to be a pretty common topic through a lot of the podcast sessions that we're going to have is just, the goal is never to get a woman. Like, the goal should always be, as a guy, forget being whether you're a brown guy, in a brown country, a brown guy in India, brown guy in another country, brown guy in Australia, whatever. I mean, the goal is always to achieve the best, to achieve your goals and become the best version of yourself, and to be growing every day and like, constantly becoming, more and more of a unique, dangerous beast. Like that's like become a fucking savage, like, and spend every day becoming more and more of a savage, like become, more physically savage, become more emotionally savage, mentally savage, become tougher, become a better human being, right? Like develop more integrity. And I think that's always the goal. It's just, I think so many channels talk about it, right? Alexander Grace and, Entrepreneurs in Cars. Like the goal should never just be like, let's go get laid, let's get a girlfriend. And so that's always just my take on it, man. It's just while we're talking about white girls and dating white girls and all that, it should always just be, hey, become the best version of yourself. And through the process of that, you're going to become more high value. You're going to become more in that 20% of men as opposed to the 80%. And attraction will flow to you. Like you'll find that, some white women will say, hey, I'm really into you. And there you go, right? You found your market. You found that subset that's ready for, as Abhi would say, because he loves his fucking business puns, that's ready for market entry. There we go, pun intended. If you laughed at that, you're terrible humans. But that's my take on that, man. Like, what's your perspective on the whole sort of personal development piece?
I think in terms of personal development, I think I couldn't say it better. Like fundamentally, like I think both of us have experienced like negative perceptions. We've both become a lot more positive and accepting, and just how we have transformed over the last 5, 7, 10 years is through personal development. Like I have a personal library of more than 300 to 400 books just on self-help, philosophy, psychology, even dating. I've consumed probably more than 10 years worth of YouTube content, easily more than 10 years. And so that, I think, a lot of it is, I think the way I think of it is like every person should be constantly working on themselves every single day, even if it's 15, 20, 30 minutes. I think doing exercises and trying to identify your limiting beliefs, identifying like negative stereotypes. Like sit down and just as a guy, like if you're listening to this, sit even as a girl, like if you're listening to this, write down what do you think of the opposite sex. Write down what do you think about certain stereotypes and certain kind of people. Like as a brown guy, you should be like, what do I think about white women? What do I think about brown women? Who do I want to get married to? What sort of person do I want to be? Like you just sit down and just identify certain things, and then like break it down, understand what has caused it. Was it nature? Was it nurture? Was it something a parent said? Something you watched on media? What has caused it? And then like, what is the right belief? What is the accurate, wisest, most correct way to think of this thing? That's how I always look at it. I think both of us have agreed that like there is no such thing as bad white women, brown women are good. None of that bullshit. What it is people are people. Some people will date you, some people won't date you. Some women are good, some women are bad. Some brown guys are good, some brown guys are horrible, creepy fucks. So like you have to like the world is just full of different people. There's a lot of diversity of character and a lot of diversity of integrity and just have to find the right person for yourself. And I think just agreeing what you're saying, I think like personal development, be the best version of you. Try to develop yourself in every way, physically, emotionally, and have a fucking mission, have a goal. Like, what do you want to do in life? Like, what is even if it's like just want to have a good, balanced life, that's fine. Or if it's be an entrepreneur, being a business, whatever your goal is, like try to achieve your goals and work towards that mission. I think you made some good recommendations to this podcast. You sort of talked about the Rational Male, and we talked about some of the YouTube channels. Alexander Grace, fantastic. Always recommend him. He's a very balanced, nuanced guy that talks about how dating and relationships work. I think any other final recommendations for our listeners, Joe?
No, man, I think you covered it. Casey Zander.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we'll link his channel as well. But he's got some really good content. Again, just around dating and how to approach dating from a better masculine frame. And ultimately a lot of what he talks about is just that dating is actually really not about dating. Dating is about winning, and dating is actually not about dating at all. It's actually about winning at life. It's winning at your mission. It's winning at your purpose. It's winning at just being a better, more savage beast every day. And that's what really attracts the right kind of women into your life. But yeah, man, great channels. We'll link that all in. But thanks for everyone for tuning in. Hope you found that a useful episode. Drop some stuff in the comments if this is on YouTube. Reach out to us on social media. We'd love to hear feedback, and we'd love to hear topics. What do you want to hear from us? Do you have any guests or ideas for us as well? We're open to ideas. But that's everything from us.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Take care. See you next week.